Catalyst, Chapter 2 by Freeze the Bees. It's dusk when Rombu rises. His room is nearly pitch black, with the blackout curtains drawn down to cover the window entirely. There's just enough light seeping through the cracks for Rombu to make out where his lamp is, so he leans over and extends his arm to switch it on. Better. With the room now bathed in a little bit of light, Rombu could see better. He scans each corner of the room to make sure everything is still in place and no burglars have broken in overnight. In the left corner sits an unused vanity, although unused may be the wrong word. A better adjective would be repurposed. On the table sits Rombu's laptop, pencils, paper, and multiple leather-bound books. The mirror was unused, though. Next to it is a closet, tall and black to match the gray-painted walls. In the right corner, next to the door, is a tall plant blocking yet another useless mirror, the plant of which is obviously named Gregory. Right side of Rombu's bed is clear, his bedside table is still in place, as is the left wall, with curtains untouched and unmoving. Good, this is good. Rombu drags himself out of bed, the heavy weight that comes with the rising moon pushing down on his body. He's always hated this part of waking up. But vampires don't really wake up, they just get up. Sleep doesn't exist for beings like him, just death and revival, hence the heaviness. Rombu heads into the hallway, closing his door behind him. The hallway is filled with more closed doors. Having all of them open makes him anxious. The thought that someone could be peering through the cracks of one of them, or that someone could easily slip into a room without Rombu noticing is terrifying, so he keeps them all closed as a safety precaution. Having a place of his own is both terrifying and liberating. It's less anxiety-inducing than his parents' place, especially with its smaller size and less ghost-infected rooms. Although Rombu can't say for certain whether or not his current living accommodations are also ghost-infested. The lower ceiling also keeps Rombu grounded. High ceilings have always made him nervous, always thinking they would collapse and kill him instantly due to impact. The scary bit, of course, is that there's no one else in the house but him, so when he hears an unwarranted creak, he immediately goes into panic mode. No other known inhabitants means no excuse for noise, and oh, how Rombu is sensitive to noise. It was fine, though. Fine. Rombu is fine. Rombu shouldn't be this nervous for a technically dead thing. Although he's dead, there's still a chance for permanent death, and that's terrifying. As much as he hates eternal life, the idea of not having it anymore is scary. Because what comes after? Darkness? Nothingness? Fading away and leaving nothing behind and having no one remember you or love you or care about you when you're gone? Yeah, Rombu would rather be kidnapped and fed garlic bread for the rest of his life than face that reality. Rombu flicks the kitchen light on, the lights dancing above the granite top island, lighting most of the room. He heads to the fridge and opens the door. There's not much sitting on the clean, white shelves, just a water filter that needs to be refilled and a bottle of red wine given to him on his 100th birthday. Most vampires keep a few blood bags in the fridge, just for snacking or eating, regularly. Rombu's not really about that, though. He's not a fan of blood, actually. It's more of a hindrance than anything. It makes him wish that human food wouldn't make him throw up every time he ate it, or that he could go grocery shopping and have the actual food be more appealing than the people, that he could come home from a night out and... Right. The plans for the night. Go downtown, find food. Hopefully. He's got it written down in one of his many books, one that's dedicated specifically to memory, because without it, he'd be completely lost and likely spending all his days in this house. Curse him for being not only dead, but also having a shit memory. Rombu's never liked the idea of getting nourishment the traditional way. He's not even a fan of getting it via the feeding clinics dotted around town, because at the end of the day, he's still biting and hurting people, which is something he's heavily against. The hopefully next to the find food is wishful thinking, a way of convincing himself that indulging in his nature isn't a bad thing. His mind doesn't seem convinced, though, because after years of writing the same mantra over and over, the thought of biting a human flesh makes him nauseous. He knows he can't go on like this forever, especially when the ache in his stomach is getting worse and worse every day and the headaches are becoming nearly unbearable. He knows that he can't starve himself forever because vampires can only go 2 years without eating, and he knows that it's going to happen sooner or later, or else he's going to have to run the risk of dying, like permanently dying. Hence the plans for the evening. Go downtown, Rumbu mutters to himself, sighing as he closes the fridge. Find food. The thought of even associating the word food with people feels inherently wrong, but maybe telling himself that will help with the process, getting this kind of thing done on his own accord rather than other scenarios. Ramu isn't human. He has no reason to sympathize with humans. He knows all the wrong that humans have done over the years, and he knows how messed up they can be, and yet he still doesn't want to hurt them. He knows his bites hurt, and he knows the general human fear comes with being around a vampire, and he doesn't want to inflict that on anybody. He could also find people who are into vampires, but it just doesn't feel right either. He'd still feel guilty. He doesn't know where he got it from. His mother had raised him the right way. She'd given him toys made specifically for biting as a kid when his fangs were still growing in, and she'd fed him blood in a bottle when he was young. She'd done everything she could to help him grow and prosper in all the best ways, and yet here he was, scared of doing the very thing he was born to do. Rambo heads back down the hall towards his bedroom, cautious as he passes each door, waiting for the moment it swings open and someone jumps out and takes him, and he opens the door to his bedroom with shaking hands and lets out a sigh of relief when nothing has changed. The vanity is in its proper place, the curtains haven't moved, and the window hasn't opened. You're fine, 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 fine. Rambu opens his closet door, no murderers, grabs a suit and puts it on. Nobody's watching him, and if he's gonna die tonight, at least he'll look good doing it. Checks the mirror before he goes, smooths out his jacket that's seemingly floating in the air, and makes sure there's nothing standing behind him, and makes a beeline towards the front door. The less time he spends in this house, the less chance he has of being attacked by burglars. Before he can leave, he grabs a black and white mask that hangs from a coat peg on the wall. He's used it to cover the lower half of his face just in case his fangs decide to randomly pop out. It's happened ever since he was a child, and he can't imagine it changing anytime soon, especially with his hunger. A mere whiff of fresh blood could trigger them. Then he steps out into the night, taking a deep breath in, after being sure to lock the door and ensure that it is truly locked, of course. The city has just gone quiet, leaving enough noise to give his brain something to sink into while maintaining the right amount of quiet. As he begins his walk out of his neighborhood into the nearest subway station, he passes by cars and people who are just heading home, small groups of teenagers and older men alike. He keeps his head down as he passes each one, not wanting to accidentally make eye contact. That would be terrifying. Each stranger he walks by makes his chest warm, and if he actually had a heartbeat, he swear it would skip 1 or 2 beats. It's not due to attraction, at least not the romantic kind. It's the instinctual want, the need to drink and feed and do all the things Rambu's resisted since birth. Even the dull, bitter smell of blood beneath skin is almost enough to trigger Rambu's fangs. He keeps his instincts at bay. He's been doing it so long it would feel weird to even think of giving in. The train station isn't too far from Rambu's gated neighborhood. It's only a couple blocks out. He gets there relatively fast, too, speeding up the pace of his walk to something inhuman when people aren't around. Rambu heads down the stairs that lead to the station. He purchases a 2-way ticket, one to go wherever he wants to go and one to get him home, and heads down to the platform. It's rather quiet tonight. He's the only one at the platform, which is perfect in his opinion. Nothing to make his nose itch. The train car pulls up shortly after his arrival, pant legs swaying in the gust of wind as each car rushes by. He approaches the entrance to the closest car and steps in, ducking his head so as to not hit the top of the door. He finds a seat across from someone else, not thinking much of it until, oh, oh, okay, so maybe Rambu isn't going to be fine. Rambu feels his fangs digging into his bottom lip before he can even process that the stranger is looking at him. The air smells saccharine, a scent that Rambu knows belongs to blood that meets oxygen. Fresh blood. And it's not strong enough to be there, though. The smell of spilled blood is staining the air. Rambu looks at the stranger and inhales deeply and, yep, that's it. The sickening sweet smell clings to the stranger. It blends with the dull bitterness, and Rambu begins to wonder where exactly it's coming from. Maybe there's an old wound hidden under the stranger's deep red hoodie. Maybe there's blood blending into that deep red hoodie. Maybe they injured themselves and it's only a small wound and it's bleeding somewhere you can't see. Maybe they had blood on their hands and just recently washed it off. Whatever it is, it draws Rambu in. And while he was looking for a longer train ride this evening, and one he could take a look at all the night owls and judge them in his mind for entertainment, he thinks this one might be far more interesting. He does his best not to stare, but a part of him can't help it. The stranger isn't the most human-looking human, if that makes sense. Their hair looks fairly normal, brown and curly, and just beneath his bangs lie grayish, greenish, bluish eyes, which is sort of normal, Ramu thinks. Their face, however, is a little different, with a nearly fully healed scar covering almost an entire half of their face. It's similar to Rambu in the sense that his own split-colored complexion, according to his mother and several family portraits, is so different to see it coming from a human. At least, Rambu thinks they're human. He's not 100% sure. The stranger glances up at him suddenly, and Rambu instantly looks away, coughing awkwardly, not wanting to get caught staring. Out of his peripheral vision, though, Rambu can begin to make out their expression. They look hurt? Afraid? They look alone and a little worried, as if they've something on their mind that they can't seem to shake, and it makes Rambu feel sympathetic, which isn't unusual for him. Rambu briefly wonders if it has to do with the smell of fresh blood. Maybe the stranger had just witnessed a fight, or tried to stop a fight. Maybe they'd been involved in a crime where blood was spilled. Maybe they were the one who spilled the blood. Maybe they were on a killing spree. Maybe Rambu was next. Those were all anxiety thoughts and assumptions, though. Silly little assumptions. Rambu knew nothing about this person, and this person knew nothing about Rambu, and things were going to be just fine. Rambu would not end up being killed in a train car. Absolutely not. But as time goes on, Rambu's feeling of fine begins to fade away. It's not unease that slips in this time. Rather, it's the hunger. Usually Rambu's only interaction with humans are fleeting, whether it be as he walks down the street, goes to a grocery store and tries to convince his body it's actually human, or he takes part in his nightly adventures on the subway. He's usually never around people for too long, and if he were, it wasn't like all of them smelled like fresh blood. Blood beneath skin was muted enough so that Rambu could tune it out. He taught himself how to do it, so it was just second nature. But since humans didn't seem too fond of losing blood, the smell of it when it was fresh wasn't something he could tune out so easily. So yeah, Rambu's instincts were sorta hard to keep down this time. He looks down at the floor. He can feel his pupils begin to dilate and his body begin to warm, going from a deathly cold to a human-like warmth, something that naturally happens when vampires want to feed as a way to coax humans in closer. It makes Rambu hate himself and his kind even more. Why humans? Why did it have to be human blood? Why couldn't it have been animal blood or just not kind of any blood at all? Why couldn't vampires live off regular human food and leave these poor people alone? Their lifespans are short enough. Why was I born like this? Why can't I just be normal? Why do I have to hurt to kill, survive? I can't. I should start over and die and start over and hope I'm human next time. The train arrives at its next stop. Rambu's ears are still full of static, so he can't quite hear what stop it is exactly, but he does see shoes shifting across the floor out the corner of his eye, and he looks up. The stranger with brown hair has risen from their seat and is about to exit at this stop. They're standing right in front of the doors, and steps out the moment they open, and following them would be creepy. What if they notice you're following them and freak out and they stab you and you die, die, die? Romney rises from his seat and heads out the door, making it out the last second before it closes. It's his instincts that drive him to do this, he reasons. It's fair to think that, though, because his footsteps don't feel entirely like his own, and he knows his eyes have to be nearly black by now, and he can feel his fangs prick the bottom lip, causing them to sting. He felt this feeling one time or another in his life, one where hunger takes over and you're nothing but a puppet on a string with thousands of years of evolution as the puppeteer. It was quite a while ago, Rambu would say, when he was 80 or 90 years old. Even with his relatively young age, Rambu had already long developed the habit of going years without feeding. He remembers one night where his mother had taken him out to town to help him socialize, and Rambu had spent the entire night feeling hues floating outside his own body, walking without stepping, looking without seeing, feeling hungry, hungry, hungry. The night had ended with Rambu digging his fangs into the wrist of a human his mother had already taken care of. After heading back home, Rambu had cried for hours, his tears burning into his pale skin. And Rambu hates to admit it, but he hasn't changed in the slightest now, even after nearly half a century. It feels like that night on the town again as Rambu stepped out into the street. The air felt different in this part of town, where the buildings stood tall and the lights never turned off. It felt heavier, even with the freshness of the night air Rambu's used to, and it doesn't help with the haziness of his mind at all. He keeps his gaze focused on the stranger ahead of him. He doesn't take his eyes off their back, following each step at a reasonable distance and preparing for advance for them to turn back and look at him. With one step comes a pang of guilt. With another comes the adrenaline with the hope of a proper meal. And he hates everything about this. He's always hated everything about this. For his entire life, he's waited as long as he can before he absolutely has to feed. About 2 years. Every 2 years, the instinctual side of him takes over. His body decides that it's gone too far without something to eat and takes over, essentially shutting off the conscious, moral side of his brain before finding something, anything. Rambu never remembers those nights. Not in full, at least. He'll occasionally get fragments of memories of those nights. There'll be flashes of the images, blurs of dark red and gray, people with lifeless eyes and limp limbs. He'll get phantom feelings of his teeth tearing into skin and blood filling his mouth, of the cries of help, muffled by what he assumes is his own hand. Even the small flashes are enough to keep Rambu in the house for a week, unable to leave his bed out of fear he might do it again. He always feels better physically, his stomach no longer growling and the instinctual part of his mind no longer pleading, but the mental baggage is enough to outweigh it all. Rambu watches as the stranger makes a sudden turn. They're about 10 paces in front of him, and Rambu's shocked they haven't turned around. Not wanting to seem too suspicious, Rambu waits outside the building, away from doors and windows, and pulls out his phone. He stares at the lock screen, swiping his fingers along it as if he were doing something productive and not just staring at the 22:34 displayed at the top. Once that time changes to 22:36, Rambu steps into the building. He didn't check the sign on his way in, but based on dim lighting and a tall table with even tablet chairs located on the right side of the elongated room, Rambu could only assume that this was a bar. Places like these weren't Rambu's favorite by any means. He wasn't a fan of drinking alcohol, nor just drinking in general. Hence the untouched wine that's been there for however long. Nor was he a fan of drunk people either. He thought humans were fine just the way they were, that they didn't need to lose their control because Rambu knows exactly what that feels like. So why would anyone want to do that to themselves deliberately? Thankfully, the place is pretty empty tonight, so Rambo has no trouble in finding a place to sit. He seats himself at a table in the corner, hopefully not too suspicious, and waits. What exactly is he waiting for? Is he waiting for the stranger to approach him? Why would they do that? Is he waiting to make a move? That's not something Rombu would do. Is he waiting till his instincts numb and his mind drag the stranger into a back alley and kill them? No, 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 no. Definitely not that one. Anything but that one. Without fully looking up, Rombu watches as the stranger takes a sip from his amber-colored drink. The stranger lets out a deep breath and sets their head down the table. Rombu is only partially tempted to ask if they're okay, maybe even introduce himself. But still, he sits, waiting for nothing at all. Rombu focuses his eyes on the table in front of him. There are some dark patches staining the wood, but besides that it looks pretty clean. This whole place looks fairly clean, in fact. Even the bartender, with dark green hair neatly slicked back and a kind smile with canines that nearly look like fangs. Speaking of which, Rambus are still out. And speaking of the waiter, they seem to be approaching him. Good evening, the waiter says. Rambo only looks up to see the pins tacked on the apron. Hi, Rambus replies meekly. What can I get for you? He asked. Rambu stammers. He's not quite sure of what to say. I'm here to watch this guy and hope I muster enough courage to speak to them and maybe eat them, so could you possibly do me a favor and speak to them about me? Yeah, no, Rambu's definitely not doing that. Instead, he settles for, I'm waiting for a friend, I think was probably not the most convincing way to end that lie, and Sam seems to agree as he cocks his head to the side and raises a brow. I could get you something in the meantime, Sam coaxes, clearly not believing a word Rambu said, but going along with his narrative anyway. No, I'm good, Rambu replies, smiling even though he knows the stranger can't see it through his mask. I don't drink much at all, actually. They just don't take. I get it. Sam interjects, stopping Rambu from having to carry on the horrid attempt of a convincing lie. And just sentence in general, actually. If you want anything, let me know. With that, Sam leaves, heaving back to his space behind the bar table. Rambu lets out a breath, relieved that the social interaction is over and he can go back to spying on the stranger, who seems to be finishing his drink in one go, draining a half that was left. They stand, nodding to Sam as they make their way towards the door, which it isn't until they're gone before Rambu notices how strong the smell of blood is. The bar feels empty without it. It had become a detail that slipped into Rambu's subconscious, and now that it was gone, Rambu could feel his hunger finding its way back in. Leave, 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 and follow that scent. It's a meal that you need to eat, kill, and fix is probably created. Rambu looks at his phone again. 22:52. The screen reads. He rises, beginning to make his way out of the bar. Before he leaves, though, he turns to Sam, who's currently in the process of washing the stranger's empty glass. Sorry, I think my friend is the next door, Rambu says. But thank you for the hospitality and all that. Yeah, sorry. No worries, Sam replies, giving Rambu a kind smile. Have fun. Rambu wordlessly nods and walks back to the door, opening it just enough to slip out into the thick night air. Rambu looks left and looks right, and finds the stranger's back and immediately takes off in the direction. He's sure to remain at least 5 sidewalk tiles away from them at all times, and makes sure Rambu has access to each alleyway he passes in case the stranger decides to turn. Maybe you could ask them for the name, at least, start some small talk, say something. Chances you'll never see this person again, and you'll have to pick someone new. But what if you don't find someone new and you're starved to your death and your life is wasted and you contributed to nothing? Humans are monsters alike, and your mother's gonna be so disappointed. She wouldn't even be sad because you were bad at the one thing you're meant to do, and suddenly, as if in slow motion, Rambu sees the stranger's head begin to turn. Rambu walks into the alleyway in a split second, moving at a speed that surely isn't natural, and now, hiding in the alleyway, He hoped no one saw, or if they did, they just assumed it was some sort of illusion. The footsteps that Rombu knows are the stranger's halt for a moment. Rombu anticipates the worst and prepares for it. If the footsteps get closer, he pretends he sees a creepy dude doing creepy things in the back alley. Because, really, that's what Rombu is. A creepy dude doing creepy things in a back alley. Rombu can't even blame his instincts this time. He could have done anything to avoid getting to this point. But here it is. This whole thing was completely and entirely preventable. Yet Rombu still let it happen, and he's a horrible person. When he dies, he's gonna have to live every feeding over and over, and he hurt so many people. The footsteps resume, trailing further away instead of toward. Rombu lets out a held breath. His stomach cramps and his head spins as his pain presses through it, causing him to double over and wraps his arm around his waist. He squeezes his eyes shut and grits his teeth, willing the pain to go away, but it just doesn't stop. It's been 1 year and 11 months since he last fed, Rombu remembers. Maybe he should just go home.